Phew. Okay. I just had a Pisces, Venus, North Node, Sun moment. I just had a 20-minute crying session before this video. I am talking about the silent generation in this video. Born 1928 through 1945. And so, of course, I was looking through my astrology charts in my app, and my grandparents are of the silent generation. Both of them on my father's side are still alive. They are the Catholic side of my family, and then I have my grandfather on my mother's side. Her father is my Native American side of my family. They are related to many four or five. I would say 4 that I can prove. 5, the 5th tribe would be hard. So I absolutely miss my grandfather on my mother's side. I am not gonna cry. Jeez, I just cried for like 20 minutes. I don't cry, and this year I've been crying a lot. It's ridiculous. I've done a lot of ancestral healing through my Native American side of my family. I've done a lot of genealogy research. I've done a lot of tracking down of birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, and, you know, getting my tribal cards. And I just miss my grandfather so much. He really, truly embodied the Native American masculine, and he was a very grounding person. He himself was a Pisces, a lot of Aries energy, but he really grounded me. He was like an angel. Just being in his presence was very calming, even if he didn't say much. It's funny, this is called the silent generation, and he truly did not say much, but when he did, you would listen. And so I'm going to read a dedication for this video to my grandfather. So this work is dedicated to my grandfather, a native man of the silent generation. A man who didn't need volume to have authority, who didn't need words to carry wisdom, who taught by presence, by restraint, by what he refused to participate in. He lived close to the land. He worked with his hands. He protected without announcing it. He carried trauma quietly, not because it wasn't heavy, but because dignity mattered more than being seen. He didn't perform masculinity. He embodied it. This video exists because of men like him, men whose silence was not absent, but boundary. Men whose love showed up as steadiness, labor, and loyalty, not explanation. If you're watching this and you feel something stir, a grief you never named, a respect you were never taught to articulate, a memory of a man who held the line without applause, this is for you too. For the grandfathers who endured so we could question, for the fathers who softened so we could feel, for the descendants who are finally allowed to speak without betraying the ones who survived by staying quiet. Grandfather, your way of being did not disappear. It lives on, not in nostalgia, but as truth. I'm sorry, I'm just getting choked up still. Oh, God, he was such a good man. I am truly, truly trying to keep the native teachings alive, embodied in love and everything else. I am very, very grateful for his energy and knowing him as a young child, because I know what true embodied masculinity is. And my father as well. My father carries that energy very deeply within him. Both sides of my family farmed. And so, yes, I just was so touched. I reopened his birth chart and the tears started flowing. All right, so I'm going to start with an introduction. I had to get that out of my system. I am still tearing up. I'm going to start with an introduction for the silent generation 1928 through 1945, and then I'm going to go into the history of that generation, non-astrology, just go through, the politics, religion, war, inventions, things that they went through historically, and then I will get into the astrology. So, introduction, why we have to start here. So I'm starting with this generation. Before we talk about millennials, before we talk about Gen Z, before we talk about burnout, dating collapse, polarity confusion, or nervous system dysregulation, we have to start here with a generation that learned how to survive without ever saying what it cost them. This video is not about blaming the past. It's about understanding the original imprint that shaped every generation that followed. Because trauma doesn't begin where it explodes, it begins where it goes silent. For most of the 20th century, survival required something very specific: emotional suppression, unquestioned duty, loyalty over truth, endurance over expression, and that survival strategy worked. But it came with a price that was never metabolized. The silent generation did not lack love, they lacked safety to feel it out loud. Historically, this generation was shaped by Pluto moving from Cancer into Leo, survival of the family, then survival through role and authority. Neptune dissolving emotions into duty and usefulness. Uranus destabilizing material safety. Chiron wounding worth, the body, and the right to rest. What they learned was simple, brutal, and effective. If I endure, we survive. If I feel too much, everything could fall apart. That belief wired their nervous systems. It shaped their relationships, and it became the polarity blueprint passed down to every generation after them. So when later generations struggle with emotional availability, intimacy, burnout, self-worth, nervous system regulation, or the feeling that love requires self-erasure, they are not too sensitive. They are responding to a survival code that was never meant to be permanent. So this section is about where that code began, because you cannot repair polarity, intimacy, or embodiment without first understanding the generation that learned to survive by going quiet. This is the foundation. Okay, let me make sure I'm always toggling between multiple different things here. All right, so I changed my mind on what I wanted to. Okay. All right, so I'm going to briefly go through the history. I don't know which. I've got a brief one and I've got a longer one. Give me 1 second here. I'm making my mind up on the fly. All right, so I'm going to do the brief first and then I'm going to break it down because I'm very, very interested in polarity, how it affects the masculine and feminine. All right, so this will be part A of history. The economic field, survival is not optional. So the Great Depression was 1929 through 1939. And this generation is 1928 through 1945. So on October 29th, 1929, the stock market crashed. 1930 through 1933, bank failures and mass unemployment. 1933, 25% U.S. unemployment. Bread lines, soup kitchens, and rationing became normal. What it wired: scarcity equals safety logic. Hoarding resources equals nervous system regulation. Emotion feels wasteful in crisis. I'm starting to realize this generation and the early generation below that certainly has hoarding issues. Hoarding issues. Yeah, that's something. That is definitely something. Children absorbed adult fear before they can name it. Nervous system imprint: freeze plus endurance, worth equals usefulness, and rest equals danger. War and global trauma. Do not add to the burden. World War II atmosphere was 1939 through 1945. September 1st, 1939, World War II begins. December 7th, 1941 was Pearl Harbor. 1941 through 1945, total war economy. August 1945, the atomic bombs. Field impact continues into early boomers. What it wired. Silence equals patriotism. Complaining equals betrayal. Men equals endurance, protect, and obey. Women equals stabilize, absorb, and hold it together. Love becomes containment, not expression. Government propaganda and social order. Trust authority or perish. 1933 through 1945. FDR era, New Deal, and war propaganda. Authority is framed as the stabilizer. Conformity becomes protective. Nervous system imprint, safety through obedience, deference to hierarchy, and suppression of dissent. Education and discipline culture. Do your job, don't ask why. Rote memorization, strict discipline, corporal punishment common. Compliance rewarded, sensitivity punished. Imprint, emotions compartmentalized. Be good equals be quiet. Intelligence, divorce from embodiment. Religion and moral culture. Endurance and be good. You know, on my father's side, we are Catholic, a Catholic family, and on my mother's side, they're Native American. So that was like, I was looking into the silence of both the polarities, the men and the women on both sides, parallel within this generation. And I just started bawling. Even that dynamic in itself, I grew up in both, and they are both different. And so, yeah, that really got me going. All right. So, religion and moral culture, endurance and be good, duty, sacrifice, sin, virtue, reframing, suffering, spiritualized, desire treated as suspicious, imprint, guilt around pleasure and rest, feminine softness equals weakness, masculine tenderness discouraged, technology as nervous system training, machines outside, machines inside. Instead of listing inventions separately, we're going to group them by what they trained. I will list that later. This is just a brief introduction, just to kind of get the feel of how I'm going to break this down. So, industrial labor, assembly line logic. Humans became units, worth equals output. Radio and centralized media, authority speaks, you listen, inner truth devalued. War tech and nuclear reality, one mistake can end everything. Emotional shutdown becomes maturity. And that's different with the natives and the Christian Catholic folk. War tech and, okay, so medical expansion. We had penicillin and hospitals. Body treated as fixable machines. Less listening and more overriding. Polarity result. Masculine equals machine, protector, and provider. Feminine equals shock absorber and peacemaker. Neither is allowed. Real softness. So I was raised not not it's just not very common to be raised Catholic, and with the Native American dynamic thing going on. And so I don't even remember what I was going to say. It's just a very different dynamic. And so I always keep the Native American in the back of my mind and obviously in my body, because when I talk about history and the polarity dynamics, the natives like really didn't, they're silent. They withdrew and they were in their own worlds, and they just didn't treat the masculine and the feminine the same. And so, yes, I just have to give props props where props are due. It's just Wild to me. All right, so the unspoken rules they pass down. Don't complain, be grateful. It could be worse. We don't talk about that. I have like silence, non-talking issues, like from the Catholic side and from the Native American side. I have a lot of asteroids in Gemini, and so that's my feminine wounding from both sides of the family. I break down charts generationally. I've been doing this for years and years, and just like you can see the generational trauma passed down through astrology. And so mine is speaking and communication, the silence. It brings up a lot speaking about the silent generation within me, because I can see what's been passed down and how it took me a long time to get this far into being able to teach on YouTube. It's taken me a long time to get to where I'm at. And so I do try to speak for those that cannot, because I've lived it and I understand it. So later generations experience this as emotional unavailability, coldness, and rigidity, shame around needs, confusion is love, duty, or closeness. So that was the short breakdown. And now I'm going to go a little deeper. All right, so the economic field, survival is not optional. So the Great Depression, 1929 through 1939, wired scarcity consciousness, hoarding resources equals safety, emotional expression seen as wasteful. I kind of already broke down quite a bit of this. And then war and global trauma do not add burden. So fathers are absent, traumatized, or killed, mothers under chronic stress, children raised inside fear. Silence equals patriotism, and complaining equals betrayal. Emotional suppression as moral virtue. Political structure, trust authority, or perish. We had government and social order, 1933 through 1945. Franklin D. Roosevelt was the president. We had loyalty tests, nationalism, conformity emphasized. New Deal programs expand federal authority. What this taught: authority is necessary for survival. Individual feelings are secondary to collective stability. Questioning leadership equals danger. Now, I don't want to point out all of this stuff. I am not a person that believes that you should burn it all down. I don't believe in the burn it all down. We need to burn all the systems down. I want to bring clarity to what we have gone through and what we are going through, because I am all about integration. I do not believe in burning the systems down. I do not believe in pointing the finger. Every era, every generation served its purpose. I think it's important to really look at it and understand where generations were at, how they were, in survival mode, what that did to men and women and their children, and what was passed down from each generation, and how we can heal ourselves and realize where we are currently at. That is that's my purpose here. All right. Education system, schooling in the 1930s through the 40s. So we had the rote memorization, strict discipline, corporal punishment common, emotional intelligence non-existent, children trained for compliance, not creativity. What was rewarded: quiet, obedience, productivity, and gender conformity. What was punished: emotional expression, sensitivity, questioning authority, non-conformity. Nervous system imprint: freeze response normalized, emotions compartmentalized, intelligence divorced from embodiment. And then we have religion and moral culture, 30s through the 40s. The dominant themes: Christianity as moral backbone. We have been Catholic. Sin, duty, sacrifice, emphasized. Heaven, promised after endurance. Earthly suffering, normalized. What this taught? Pain is noble. Desire is suspect. Self-sacrifice equals virtue. God rewards endurance, not authenticity. Nervous system imprint. Suppressed pleasure, guilt around rest or joy. Feminine softness equated with weakness. Masculine tenderness and discouraged. Gender role, survival, polarity, masculine conditioning, provider or nothing, emotional stoicism, physical labor valued over emotional presence, vulnerability equals threat to family stability. Feminine conditioning, emotional shock absorber, invisible labor, needs minimized, expression deferred indefinitely. Polarity outcome, masculine equals duty, endurance, and silence. Feminine equals containment, emotional labor, and self-erasure. This is not romantic polarity. This is emergency polarity. What the generation passed down unconsciously. I'm going to have to get a little more comfortable. Hopefully you can hear me well. For some reason, I just can't get this to... Give me 1 second. God, that's like... I'm not strong enough. Oh, yeah. Phew. Gosh, it's been frozen. There we go. I got it. I feel like you can't hear me very well. Okay. I'm freaking struggling. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me a little better. I don't like being that much covered up, but okay, there. All right. So we're good. Okay. So what this generation passed down unconsciously. I'm just going to take a full break for a second. So they didn't pass down trauma stories. Silence. They pass down rules. Don't complain. Be grateful. It could be worse. You're lucky to have what you have. We don't talk about that. Which later generations experience as emotional unavailability, coldness, rigidity, shame around needs, confusion about love versus duty. And that is why my love language is action, not words. I'm terrible. All right. Okay, so the silent generation didn't learn love through intimacy. They learned it through survival under threat. All right, so why this matters? Because millennials didn't invent burnout. Gen Z didn't invent disassociation. Modern dating didn't invent polarity collapse. They inherited a system that never metabolized fear. And this is why my work is restoring earth, the body, and nervous system truth. This is not a trend. It's the missing phase of history. All right, so I've got a lot going on here. It's going to be a long video, so I'm going to have to break down each generation into its own video for sure. Okay, so I've overdone myself with information. Let me make sure. I don't repeat myself. Yeah, war and military power. Harry S. Truman authorized the atomic bombings in 1945, introduced the world to existential threat at mass scale. Imprint, power decisions override human feeling. Emotion has no place in survival logic. Imprint, leadership equals calm, contained, emotionally unavailable. And then we had economic and industrial power. We had Henry Ford, of course, assembly line efficiency ethos, humans as labor units, productivity worship. Imprint value equals output, rest and softness are liabilities. J. Edgar Hoover, surveillance culture, fear of distant, control through silence. Imprint, don't reveal inner life, privacy equals safety. Religion and moral authority, Billy Graham. Mass revival culture, late silent to early boomer. Moral discipline, emotional restraint framed as virtue. Suffering is noble, desire is suspect. We had Pope Pius. Silence during atrocities, preservation of institutional stability over emotional truth, imprint, authority over vulnerability, containment over expression, education and cultural shapers. B.F. Skinner, behavioralism rises, humans treated as stimulus response machines, inner emotional life ignored. Feelings are irrelevant, behavior matters, not experience. John Dewey, education as social function, individual expression secondary to societal role. You exist to serve the system. Media and propaganda, Edward Bernays, father of public relations, mass emotional manipulation via media. Consent manufactured, not felt. Imprint, feelings are guided externally. Inner truth is not trusted. What these figures taught without words. Together, these leaders encoded a collective rule book. Don't feel too much. Don't question authority. Don't burden others with emotion. Be useful, be loyal, be quiet, and endure. This is why silents aren't cold, they're compressed. The silent generations didn't grow up with emotional safety, they grew up with survival leadership. And then, of course, we had Martin Luther King rebelling against the silence. I've done a lot of recent research into Martin Luther King and realized deeper about what he was actually affiliated with, but I'm going to mention him here because he broke the mold. So the figures listed earlier represented the dominant nervous system authority shaping the silent generation. Government, war, leadership, industry, religion as order, and institutional power. They were the voices reinforcing silence, endurance, obedience, and emotional suppression. MLK was not reinforcing that system, he was interrupting it. So Martin Luther King Jr. is not a product of the silent generation's polarity system. My phone's in front of my face. What is his exact? I'm going to lose I can't remember. He was born, I think, at the very end of this generation. No, that wouldn't be right. He is of the silent generation, but I'm sure the later, he was really breaking the mold. So he represents suppressed emotion, finally speaking, moral truth overriding obedience, the feminine principle, empathy, conscience, relational truth, confronting rigid masculine authority. That's why he was resisted, surveilled, destabilizing to institutions, and ultimately assassinated. Not because he was wrong, but because he violated the survival contract of that era. MLK's true role, the nervous system rebellion. MLK embodied what the silent generation was never allowed to express: grief in public, moral outrage without violence, vulnerability is strength, love is an active force, not silent endurance. In polarity language, he reintroduced heart-led masculinity authority into a world built on emotionless power. That was intolerable to the system. So his birth chart places him as a bridge soul, not a conformist expression of his generation. He carried a prophetic voice, Neptune activated, moral leadership, Leo Cancer polarity themes, Chiron level collective wounding around worth, dignity, and existence. In other words, he spoke what the silent generation felt but could not say safely. Why he was dangerous to the era: because he directly challenged the silent generation's unconscious rules. Silent generational rule: don't feel publicly, MLK violation, he cried publicly. Don't disrupt order, he just disrupted unjust order. Loyalty over truth, truth over loyalty. Endure quietly, speak and act visibly. That's why the state reacted the way it did. All right. So yeah, he was definitely a system disruptor. All right, so I've already gone through mass industrialization, radio, automobiles, war. Okay, so these were technologies, invention, core technological and industrial inventions. So we had mass industrialization, the 20s through the 40s. Assembly line manufacturing becomes dominant, standardized labor, repetitive work, humans treated as replaceable units. Nervous system imprint, sir, don't stand out, don't slow the machine, do your job. Radio mainstream by the 30s. Radio becomes a primary household technology, centralized voice of authority, one-way communication, news, war updates, propaganda, and moral messaging. Authority speaks, you listen. Emotion is private, information is controlled. Automobiles, widespread by the 30s. Cars become functional, not luxury. Mobility increases for work, not freedom. Infrastructure built for labor and war readiness. Imprint, movement equals productivity, not pleasure. Military and war technology defining. So World War II technology explosion, 39 through 1945. So tanks, submarines, aircraft, radar developed during World War II, sonar, advanced ballistics, chemical warfare knowledge, the atomic bomb in 1945. The war permanently linked technology equals destruction. Innovation equals death. Secrecy equals safety. Imprint. Feelings don't matter. Efficiency saves lives. Silence keeps you alive. Nuclear technology. The atomic bomb changes human consciousness. Instant mass annihilation becomes possible. Collective imprint. One mistake ends everything. This is deep freeze trauma in the collective nervous system. Medical and health inventions. Antibiotics. Penicillin widely used in the 40s. Penicillin mass production during World War II. Suddenly infections don't automatically mean death. Imprint, the body is a machine that can be fixed, not listened to. The body is something to manage, not feel. Hospital systems expand. Institutional medicine grows. Authority of doctors increases. Emotional or psychological pain largely dismissed. Experts know best. Don't question, endure treatment. Psychology, early, cold, and institutional. Freudian theory exists, but not as mainstream. Mental health is stigmatized. Trauma is unnamed. Shell shock exists, but is minimized. Imprint, if you're struggling, something is wrong with you, stay quiet. Education system shift. Standardized education. Obedience-based schooling, memorization, discipline, emotional expression discouraged. Creativity, secondary to conformity. Good children don't cause problems. Smart children follow rules. GI Bill in 1944 expands higher education after the war. Education tied to service and sacrifice. You earn stability through duty. So, yeah, we had the big boom in industrialization, manufacturing, as well as this education is prepping you for that type of work afterwards. Just memorize things, don't understand how to critically think. Sit and listen and do. Religion and moral technology. So, institutional religion at peak authority. Church attendance extremely high. Religion used for moral order, obedience, gender roles, endurance narratives. I don't even want to get into the religious lack of feminine. um my feminine role model, I know there's Mary Magdalene, but I literally never learned about her in my younger Catholic years. It was all about the Virgin Mary. This is who I looked up to, as the Virgin Perfect Mary. That's impossible to perfect almost. It's just I took it very seriously. I lived in a hole my whole life, looked up to the Virgin Mary, and at 14 I started rebelling. Oh, wow, Okay, we're talking about a different generation here. I know, I just, was raised by this generation pretty much, so it's, really wild to, look back in my own life. All right, so domestic technology, quiet but important. Household appliances, washing machines, refrigeration becomes more common. Vacuum cleaners. I still use an old school, freaking heavy, insane vacuum cleaner, actually, that my grandmother had. And yeah, I'm very old school in very many different ways. And I can tell you that it works very well. My newer vacuum sucks and broke down after like 2 years, and so I'm back to the basics. Hilarious. They just don't build things like they used to. So, yeah, this isn't all negative, right? All right, these tools reduce visible labor, did not reduce emotional labor. Imprint, do more quietly with less complaint. The big pattern. All silent generation technology shared these traits: centralized authority, efficiency over humanity, survival over expression, productivity over pleasure, silence over emotion. This is why love became duty, care became service, masculinity became endurance, femininity became containment. Emotional labor is a very real thing. And if you can think emotional trauma is almost worse than physical trauma to a degree, it can last a long time. Emotional containment, weaponized incompetence. Is this where it began? Trauma went unspoken but lived in the body. All right, so the silent generation grew up in a world where technology taught one lesson: survival first, feel later, if ever. All right, so now I'm going to get into how technology wired the masculine and feminine polarity. I am on a masculine feminine polarity roll, and I am integrating that into everything I do. Ew, the sun's going to be coming out soon. All right, so silent generation template, 1928 through 1945. This generation didn't just live through inventions, their nervous systems were trained by them. Technology didn't just change life, it retrained gendered energy expression. So, assembly lines and industrial labor, breaking this down now in a masculine and feminine polarity. So, the invention, we had assembly line manufacturing, factory labor, shift work, replaceable human units. I'm forever. All right. So masculine impact. Masculine worth equals output. Leadership equals endurance. Emotion is inefficiency. Identity fused with role. Masculine polarity became stoic, task focused, emotionally unavailable, and valuable only when producing. But this wasn't necessarily the performative masculine. This is like the real grit. All right, so feminine impact, feminine energy removed from public power. Was it really removed? It really was never in power here. And then you look at your Native American side of the family and you're like, how do you the parallel? It's totally different. I've lived in 2 different worlds my whole life. It's really wild to me. So, anywho, those are extremes too, by the way. Feminine energy removed or never really in public power. Creativity suppressed. Nurturing regulated to unpaid labor. Emotional intelligence devalued. Feminine polarity became invisible, supportive only, background regulation, and non-expressive. Polarity distortion created. Masculine equals machine, feminine equals maintenance crew. Neither allowed softness. Radio centralized voice of authority. The masculine authority and the feminine silence. The invention, one-way communication. Government and military messaging, moral instruction, and propaganda delivery. Masculine impact. Authority equals voice without vulnerability. Speaking equals commanding, not relating. Listening equals obedience. Masculine polarity became directive, top down, emotionally sealed. I tell you, comply. Feminine impact. Listening became default feminine role. Emotional response internalized. Voice discouraged unless aligned with authority. Feminine polarity became absorbing, non-confrontational, quietly adaptive, and self-silencing. Polarity distortion created. Masculine speaks, feminine absorbs, no mutual exchange. Automotives, functional mobility. And this is where I really started digging into my grandfather's chart, because on my Native American side, his wife never drove. And on my other side, it was never like that. And I'm just like, what is the deal with that? And the Native American, like, that's a protective, not a controlling thing. It was more of like, automobiles are dangerous. I will do everything that you need. And then I started getting all teary and like, wow, the difference between, different cultures, the Europeans, and that just hit me. It was like a beautiful type of ordeal. He certainly raced automobiles, he raced horses, had 30 freaking cars, nice cars. He worked on cars. That man could do it all. I miss him so much. I do. And it was like, I always, as a kid, I'm like, why does my grandma not drive? And I just kind of was like, is this controlling, or like, what is this? And now I'm sitting as an older adult, like, no, it was like a real protective, I'm going to do everything and provide for you thing. And it's actually pretty beautiful. And she didn't mind at all. She was taken care of completely. So, yes. All right, so masculine direction, feminine displacement. The invention, cars as tools for work, commutes, logistics, and war readiness. Masculine impact, direction equals productivity, movement equals purpose, rest equals laziness. Masculine polarity became forward driving, goal obsessed, detached from sensation. Where are we going next? Feminine impact, grounded presence, devalued, cycles ignored, body rhythms overridden. Feminine polarity became unrooted, overridden, forced to keep pace, disconnected from rest. Polarity distortion created, direction without attunement, motion without presence. War technology, World War II. Masculine armor, feminine freeze. The invention, weapon systems, radars, bombers, nuclear threat. Masculine impact, emotional shutdown as survival. Vulnerability equals death risk. Leadership equals suppression of fear. Masculine polarity became hyper controlled, armored, fearless on the surface, disconnected underneath. Feminine impact, emotional holding intensified, fear managed internally, grief postponed for indefinitely. Feminine polarity became frozen, containing terror, holding everyone together, unable to release. Polarity distortion created. Masculine equals protector without feeling. Feminine equals container without relief. Seeing how much longer we've got here. All right, so I think you kind of get the idea. Medical technology. I'm going to go through a couple more, and then I'm going to get into the astrology because that excites me. Medical technology, antibiotics in hospitals, masculine fixing, feminine bodily disconnection. The invention, antibiotics, institutional medicine, expert authority over body. I have spent insane amounts of money on education, and oh my God, I went down this rabbit hole. This is just my natural personality, is questioning everything. And I just went through this, like, I went through these courses, and I'm like, I just started calling mainstream medicine allopathic, and I'm just like, I'd rather go to a naturopath, and I'm holistic, and I've gone through so many phases. That's funny. All right, so the invention, I already went through that. Masculine impact, problem solving replaces listening, pain treated as malfunction, emotional causes dismissed. Masculine polarity became fix it mode, detached from sensation, just solve it. Feminine impact, body wisdom ignored, intuition invalidated, systems Symptoms dismissed. Feminine polarity became disconnected from body signals, doubting intuition, overridden by experts. Polarity distortion created. Mind dominates body. Feminine somatic intelligence silenced. All right, so I think I'm burnt out on this. So the core polarity result. Technology trained polarity into survival roles, not relational flow. Masculine became armored, directive, emotionally unavailable, defined by output. Feminine became absorbing, silent, self erasing, and defined by endurance. So this is not traditional polarity. This is trauma adapted polarity. These inventions didn't just modernize society, they trained men to become machines and women to become shock absorbers. So, why this matters now? Every later generation rebels against this wiring, overcorrects it, or collapses under it. Millennials burned out trying to undo it. Gen Z dissolved it without grounding. Gen Alpha will either repair it consciously or repeat it digitally. All right, make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, so that is enough of the non-astrological, the history of the silent generation, and then also the masculine feminine polarity breakdown. You can kind of see how each invention and whatnot, the pillars of society, how they affected the masculine and feminine. So now I'm going to get into the astrology after almost an hour. All right. I'm going to do this for each generation. All right, silent generation, born 1928 through 1945. Pluto in Cancer, 1914 through 1939. And then we have Pluto going from Cancer into Leo, 1939 through 1957. And I should, I didn't make a smaller intro to explain. So Pluto tells us what collapsed, asteroids tell us how humans adapted, and Earth tells us how to repair it. So Pluto, generationally, astrologers look at the generation through Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and some of them take Chiron into consideration. Most do not include the asteroids I am, because it's a freaking thing, and Earth, which no one talks about, so of course I am. So Pluto represents what broke, Neptune, how reality was escaped or blurred, Uranus, how stability was disrupted, the asteroids, how the body adapted, and then the Earth, what must be embodied to heal it. So it is a repair map. So the planets, your personal planets, are power structures. Asteroids are lived experience of power. Generations share planetary trauma. Individuals carry asteroid-specific repair roles. All right. All right, so I think that's good enough. And if you don't understand what I'm saying with astrology, go back to my introduction video. It's an hour long. I go around in circles explaining how you can break this down generationally, astrologically. So, and it's really interesting because I went into my my grandparents. I was trying to figure out how many birth charts I had in the silent generation, and I have obviously my native grandfather and my father's grandparents. And so I wrote down each of their planets, and my grandmother and my grandfather, born August 14th, 1943 and October 23rd, they have everything is the same. Besides Sirius, one's Gemini, one's Cancer. But the rest, all of the asteroids and Chiron and Pluto are the same. So I know they were just see June, July, August, September, October, November. So that's like 3 months difference, and the asteroids were still the same. So they will change. I gave the asteroid cycles in the prior video if you're interested in the actual years of transition. They do transition. They move quickly. 3i. I think it's funny because 3i Atlas is extremely fast, if not the fastest object we've ever tracked, and it's interstellar. So it's very interesting. I've been tracking 3i's path. Realized it's all about orientation. What is it teaching us? And now here I am landing on teaching about the asteroids because generationally and individually, I do get in birth charts, but it's just wild because we're in a new age and it's time to integrate the feminine and understand generational trauma. And yeah, so that's just been my whole theme this year with the generational Native American trauma. So why not keep going and teaching it, because it's a beautiful way to look at and break down what each generation went through, really. All right, so Pluto, we had Pluto in Cancer and Leo. Core imprint, survival through emotional suppression, loyalty to family, nation, and authority, trauma stored privately, not expressed. So you can literally break it down non-astrologically, and then you break it down astrologically, and it's like, wow, it really does fit. It fits. Astro-Psychology, it fits. Unbelievably. Pluto theme, Cancer, emotional survival, homeland, family security. Leo, authority figures, leaders, pride, identity through role. Shadow, unprocessed emotional trauma, sacrifice without voice, hence silent generation. And then we have Neptune in Leo and Virgo. So the planets do change signs, normally 2 signs within a generation, depending on the planet. All right, so disassociation patterns. Emotions translated into duty, feelings organized away, love expressed through service, not vulnerability. Neptune and Leo, emotional expression suppressed under pride, role, and honor. Neptune in see. Yes, okay. So Leo, if I work harder, everything will be okay. And then we have Uranus in Aries and Taurus. Disruption pattern, economic instability, early shocks to maternal safety, communication replaces emotional processing. And then we have Chiron in Taurus. Now, that is the biggest. Chiron and Taurus is like where I ground. It's a huge emphasis in this generation, but Chiron did move through multiple signs throughout this entire generation. And so the biggest emphasis was on the Chiron wound. Is it safe for me to exist if I can't provide? Identity tied to material usefulness. Body used as a tool, not a signal. Sensuality, rest, and softness was deprioritized. Polarity impact, masculine equals provider or nothing. Feminine endurance, not expression. Love shown through stability, not vulnerability. Integration work, reclaim pleasure without guilt. Safety without productivity. Body-based healing. And worth is not just usefulness. So survival anxiety, moving from body to voice to emotional security. And then earth loss. We have bodies endured, not listened to. Trauma stored semantically and never discharged. Earth repair needed, semantic release. Emotional expression without usefulness, and safety without productivity. That is the embodiment healing work. Okay, so now I am going to go through a storyline, and then I'm going to break down even more information. So the generation that learned to love through survival silence. I probably should have put this in before the history, so it was more of like a storyline first and then and then data points. I'm probably going to do that from here on out, but yeah. All right. So the house where nobody spoke. Picture a kitchen in the 1930s or early 40s, not the Pinterest version, a real one. A radio low in the background. My grandfather loves the radio, blasting all day. A table with chipped edges, a father whose hands look older than his face, a mother whose nervous system never gets to unclench, and a child watching everything, not because anyone sat them down to explain life, but because life taught them by atmosphere. The lesson wasn't said out loud, it was absorbed like smoke and fabric. Back when it was legal to, you know. Anywho, don't make it worse. Don't need too much. Don't ask for softness when the world is hard. This is the silent generation. They are not emotionless, they are trained. Trained to survive by compressing themselves because in their world, feeling didn't feed you. Feelings didn't stop war. Feeling didn't pay the bill. So they learned a polarity blueprint that still haunts the modern world. Their polarity contract. Masculine equals endure, provide, obey duty. Feminine equals hold the home together, absorb emotion quietly. Not because it was right, because it was functional under threat. When the environment is unstable, polarity becomes survival mechanics. The historic field, why their nervous systems got wired this way. These are people shaped by the Great Depression aftermath, World War II atmosphere. Even if they were children, the field was everywhere. Rationing, scarcity, trauma, normalized. Don't complain, culture. Institutional trust because you had to have it to survive. Love, so love wasn't romantic, love was duty. And commitment wasn't a vibe. Commitment was we don't get to fall apart. I am so cringing at the millennials being raised on Disney movies. It's disgusting. The Piscean Pluto disillusionment. Oh my God, I'm so happy we're out of that age. Sorry, millennial rant. It's disgusting. All right, so I'm just like, it's everything serves its purpose. I'm not saying this is totally wrong. I think there is a middle ground between between each generation. There's a middle ground that we're all hopefully trying to find and understand. So don't believe in Prince Charming, but in the same breath, like, don't not express yourself. I'm rotating between 20 different drinks. All right, so the man who loves through labor. He doesn't say I love you easily, but he fixes the door, he keeps the heat on, he goes to work sick, he carries everything quietly. His love language is load bearing, but the shadow is he doesn't know what to do with emotion because emotion feels like instability. So when tension rises, he goes colder, not to punish, but to survive. Yeah. I have a lot of Capricorn energy in me, so I'm giggling because yes, absolutely. All right, anywho. So the woman who keeps the peace at any cost. She knows the mood of the house the way sailors know weather. She anticipates before things get said. She prevents conflict before it happens. She swallows needs because her nervous system equates needs with danger. Her superpower is regulation, but it becomes self-erasure. So she becomes the emotional shock absorber. And if she never explodes, it shocks everyone. If she ever explodes, she shocks everyone because the whole family's stability was built on her silence. The shadow imprint they passed forward. This generation often passed down a hidden script. Love equals sacrifice, emotion equals burden, needs equals risk, marriage equals survival contract. Men provide, women absorb. You don't talk about what hurts. This is where modern polarity gets its root distortion. Not masculine versus feminine, but power versus silence, duty versus selfhood, and survival versus intimacy. I'm really truly hoping that breaking this down will help men and women understand how the swings, like feminism swung way too far. The pendulum swung way too far, and hopefully describing and just hopefully getting this information out will truly help just understanding of, why things were the way they were and where we got out of balance. And this isn't about pitting people against each other. I'm not pitting generations against generations. I'm not pitting men against women. That's not the freaking answer. The answer is breaking it down and understanding what all of us have been through, honestly, and then looking back and being appreciative regardless, and going forward with understanding and holding that information, and hopefully like understanding ourselves better, and like, our parents and our grandparents. Astrological backbone. So their Pluto field runs Cancer through Leo, depending on the exact year. So both my grandparents are Pluto in Leo. Let me double check here. I got the list. Pluto. Yes, Pluto and Leo. Both of my father's grandparents are Pluto and Leo, and then my mother's father was Pluto and Cancer. So, but he was born much earlier, 8 years, more than that, almost 11 years earlier. Oh, gracious sakes. Goodness, I didn't realize that age difference. Ooh. All right, gotta get more comfortable. I've been sitting Indian style. Gotta stretch my hips and legs. Okay. All right, so the silent generation, their Pluto field runs from Cancer to Leo, depending on the exact year, meaning Cancer, family survival, homeland, emotional security under threat. Leo, authority, identity through role, pride-based leadership. This creates a generation that learned that family must survive at all costs. Cancer, and the leader role must be performed even when it's hollow inside. Leo. So their polarity is role-based more than heart-based. The sacred truth and the limit. Here's what they got right. They knew that commitment requires effort. They knew love isn't just a feeling, it's responsibility. But here's what we cannot inherit intact. They also normalized women swallowing themselves, men being emotionally unavailable as strength, silence as a virtue, endurance as proof of love. And this is exactly why later generations rebel, because the provider model worked, but it worked by crushing the feminine voice. And it's not just women, it's the emotional suppression in a man is feminine repression within themselves. Just FYI. So we don't go backwards. We extract the wisdom without inheriting the oppression. Not just women oppression, it's literally within your own self as a man as well. So the silent generation carried a polarity blueprint built for survival. They didn't lack love, they lacked safety to feel it out loud. This is the foundation stone beneath every later generation. When a culture survives by silencing emotion, the next generations don't just become sensitive, they become starving for intimacy, truth, and repair. All right. All right, so outer planet backbone. What broke the outer planets? Emotional expression equals dangerous. Survival required silence. Authority was not questioned. Love was proven through endurance. So asteroid adaptive layer. Let me see. Oh, yep, we're done. So I am going to add more to the asteroid adaptation layer. I am going to be getting into many more birth charts that I have, as well as more family members, and because each asteroid does move quickly, 4 to 5 months or so. So I just want to give a little overview of how it works. And I'm actually going to, so I'm going to go through that first, and then I'm going to break down my own grandparents' charts to kind of give you how it plays out with the asteroids. So, outer planets, asteroid adaptation layer. So Sirius is care equals duty, not nourishment. Vesta, devotion to family, nation over self. Juno, marriage as survival contract. Lilith, emotional truth suppressed. Pallas, feminine intelligence ignored. Chiron, I exist only if I fulfill my role. So nervous system pattern for this generation: freeze and suppress. Love equals loyalty, not expression. All right, so I'm going to end this with my grandparents. Okay, so my grandfather, my Native American grandfather, he had Pluto in Cancer and Chiron in Taurus. So this is silent generation masculine survival wiring. Core masculine blueprint. Pluto in Cancer, survival through family protection. Identity fused with being needed, being relied upon, being the emotional and material container. And he was certainly that through his own way. Chiron and Taurus, the deepest wound here is worth equals usefulness. Safety comes from providing rest, pleasure, softness, feeling unsafe or undeserved. So internal question: if I stop producing, do I still deserve to exist? Feminine and relational layer with the asteroids. So we had Sirius in Capricorn. Care expressed through duty, not affection. Vesta in Pisces, self-sacrifice, spiritualized endurance. Lilith in Aries, suppressed anger around autonomy and desire. Pallas in Sagittarius, moral clarity, principle-driven thinking. Shariklo in Cancer, quiet emotional holding for others. And Pholos in Capricorn, and Nessus in Aries, generational authority, trauma, anger passed down rather than spoken. A lot of the Native American silencing. Polarity expression. Masculine equals protector, provider, emotionally silent. Feminine equals endurance, not expression. Love equals showing up, not opening up. And then my grandmother. So my father's grandparents are still alive. My grandmother has Pluto in Leo, Chiron in Virgo. So this is a different silent generation feminine pattern, more expressive but still constrained. Core feminine blueprint, Pluto in Leo, identity tied to role, pride, appearance, and being good or admired. Chiron in Virgo, wound around never being enough, love earned through service, fixing, helping, and perfecting. Internal question: if I stop improving things, will I still be loved? Feminine asteroid pattern. She has Sirius and Gemini, and both my grandparents are the same, so I'm not going to go through both. Mental devotion, constant engagement. So the later portion of this generation spoke more. I mean, she was like Catholic. She taught all kinds of groups of women, and she was a talker, but she was silent in other ways. So Juno in Capricorn, marriage as obligation and stability contract. Lilith in Leo, desire to be seen but fear of punishment for it. Chariklo in Libra, emotional balancing and peacemaking. Pholos in Capricorn, Nessus in Taurus, inherited survival, anxiety, scarcity, imprint. Polarity expression, feminine equals capable, expressive, within limits. Masculine projected onto partner equals authority and stability. So she holds the emotional field by managing it, not by resting inside of it. Actually, I might do both. Let me make sure. Because it does play out different for men and women. All right, no, I'm not going to. So the family pattern. So shared themes: love equals duty, care equals responsibility, emotion equals something to manage, not express, worth equals usefulness, safety equals stability, not intimacy. Nervous system inheritance: this lineage passed down hyper responsibility, emotional containment, conflict avoidance, service instead of softness, endurance instead of vulnerability. So this explains why later generations feel emotionally hungry, burnt out, confused about polarity, desperate for intimacy, but unsure how to sustain it. And then I got into my grandfather being Native American changes the expression of the silent generation pattern, not the core wound. So the silent generation imprint is still there for him. Survival first, nervous system, duty over expression, provision equals love. But Native American masculine codes carry a different relationship to authority, land, and gender roles than European industrial patriarchy. So that's why his behavior stood out to me and why I went through a 20-minute crying session. I miss him so much. Oh, God, I miss him so much. All right. So I already explained why his wife did not drive and what that actually signals. So European patriarchy control, this is the version most people assume. Dominance, ownership, female dependency, ego-based authority. So that does not match my grandfather with his indigenous masculine protector logic. In many Native American cultures, especially the plains, woodland, and some Great Lakes traditions, the masculine role equals protector of movement and direction. Native Americans are all about movement, orientation, the four directions. Travel equals exposure, risk, and responsibility. Who drives equals who carries danger and accountability. So this wasn't about control for him. It was more about that he would carry the risk. And I just want to add this layer in here because I want to honor the Native American side of myself and give you an example of how it can play out a little bit differently. So, silent generation, Native men shaped by colonial pressure, forced assimilation, land loss, racialized danger, and survival anxiety. So he would have thought letting her drive would expose her to danger, failing at his role, and abandoning responsibility. So it wasn't about controlling his wife. It was more about control of risk. And so the European industrial family systems had clear gender role scripts, per se. Patriarchy is hierarchy, not stewardship. So Native Americans were all about stewardship, not the hierarchy. So for the industrial family systems, it would have been seen as control, more of a controlling thing. And for the Native Americans, it's more of a symbolic duty thing. I lived with both of these growing up, so it just was fascinating. And then my grandfather, he had Pluto in Cancer, protector of the family archetype, safety through containment. I carry it so you don't have to. And his Chiron in Taurus, safety equals material control, body protection, stability through sameness and routine. Driving equals movement and unpredictability, so he controlled it not to dominate but to stabilize. The subtle but important polarity distinction. So I felt this so deeply, and I never really had the words, and I never really looked at his chart like this, so I'm just kind of like integrating this with you, and I miss him so much, and I'm gonna try not to get emotional. He carried the masculine energy. It wasn't something that I understood when I was young. He died in 2009, I believe, 8 or 9, and he carried this embodied peaceful masculine, and I didn't understand this stuff back then. I was like, 17, 18, and just being in his presence was so peaceful. You knew you were protected. So For him, it was not about fragile masculinity, ego inflation, fear of feminine autonomy. For him, it was hyper responsible masculinity, protector identity, and survival code polarity. So my native grandfather didn't control movement to dominate women. He controlled risk because survival taught him someone had to. And then I don't know if I want to get into this here, but I had, the silence is different with, depending on what religion you were raised in, depending on what generation you were raised in. I had the polarity of my Catholic side of my family, the silence with the women in that generation. I was raised by my grandmother. My mother was never in my life, really. And so that's my core Chiron moon and Cancer. But my grandmother is pretty much my mother. So, and she's in this generation. And she was Catholic. My family's Catholic. And on my other side, they're Native American. So I want to kind of break down the differences there just to give you a personal explanation of how to layer on many different layers when you're trying to figure out your own lineage, generational, whatever stuff being passed down. And so the Catholic culture for the silent generation emphasized hierarchy, God, church, priest, father, family. Endurance is virtue, suffering as redemptive, silence is holiness, guilt is moral regulator, obedience over self-expression. Emotion wasn't processed, it was offered up. So this creates a polarity model where masculine equals moral authority, discipline, and duty. Feminine equals sacrifice, patience, emotional labor, and quiet endurance. Not overt domination, moral containment. So my Catholic grandparents likely followed a script like this. So men led by moral authority and responsibility. Women hold families together through self-sacrifice. Conflict is avoided, not confronted. Appearances and doing the right thing matter deeply. Pain is normalized, even spiritualized. So women doing everything without complaint, men being distant but dutiful, emotional silence framed as strength, staying together no matter what. So this is not ego-based patriarchy, it's sacramental patriarchy. Authority justified by God, not self. Comparing this to my Native American grandfather's side. So Catholic masculinity is moral order, hierarchy, endurance. Indigenous masculinity is stewardship, protection, and risk containment. Both can look traditional, but they feel very different in the body. And that's every time I remember my grandfather, it is such a bodily experience because I remember how he made me feel. So that's what gets me every single time. So my Catholic grandparents, heavy, quiet, guilt-laden. My grandfather, firm, grounded, protective, less emotionally shaming. So that's why they feel different. So my Catholic grandparents with the Pluto, Leo, Chiron, Virgo patterns, identity tied to role, worth through service, guilt regulating behavior, emotional discipline into usefulness. And then for my Native American grandfather who had Pluto and Cancer, Chiron and Taurus, safety through protection, body and resources guarded, love shown through containment, not moralizing. One says endure, it's holy. The other says I'll carry it, you don't have to. Those are not the same masculine archetypes, but in the same generations with the same type of trauma. So I grew up sensing when authority is containment versus when authority is suppression. That discernment didn't come from theory. It came from watching two different systems lived in the same generation. So that has sharpened my intuition. So I can smell moral guilt a mile away. I react strongly to ego inflation and lying, and I can tell when tradition is hollow versus rooted. So my nervous system learned the difference early. All right, so yes, they land very different in the body, and I apologize for getting emotional, but it's very different, and I just wanted to share that with you. So anyways, that is my video on the silent generation. I will be continuing this for sure. I am going to do a heck of a lot more studies with the asteroids. Honestly, if you are in this generation and you are interested in this work, please feel free to put your asteroids if you would like to. It might seem too personal, and if it is too personal, feel free to email me. Email me or post in the comments below where your asteroids are. I am extremely curious. They do move through the 12 signs throughout the Pluto generation. So Pluto, you're moving from Cancer to Leo. So your Pluto is either going to be in those two signs. You know, Neptune, Uranus. It's the same for each. And the asteroids do move quicker. I'm just curious. What do you think about this video? I don't see anything else out there. I say that all the time because I am like an Aquarius mind, Aries rising, and so I'm like pioneering, and this isn't even really pioneering. It's bringing old language, old wisdom that has been repressed, suppressed, unintegrated for a very long time. So, alrighty, I am going to move on to the next generation, which is the I have a hard time remembering what generations go in order. Baby boomers, 1946 through 1964. So I'm getting into the baby boomers. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely like and subscribe. I appreciate you all very deeply. What is today? The 21st? So today is the 21st. This is my very last day. I am doing a sale on all of my books and my gear. I have stickers, shirts, t-shirts, sweaters, computer cases, stuff like that in my apparel, on my apparel website. And then I also have 25-30 books available on my other website, 33% off. Today is the very last day. If you want to grab anything from my products, use code Phoenix, PHOENIX 33 to get 33% off. And I greatly, deeply appreciate your support. And yes, definitely leave a comment on your thoughts and feelings. I read them all, and I'm extremely curious what you thought about this. So anyway, I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for being here, and take care. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I will see you on the other side.